Welcome to Suburban Death Metal Dad Recommends, episode 23, where I'll be talking about Napalm Death. So just give a quick overview on the band. They were formed in 1981 in Birmingham, England, and released a bunch of demos, and then in 1987 released their first full-length, which was basically 2 recording sessions put together. And I'm talking about the landmark grindcore release, Scum. And over the years, the band has shifted their sound from grindcore into death metal, and then a mixture of both, and also in particular in the 90s, a little bit more experimentation, a cleaner sound. And then I would say their more recent releases are definitely leaning towards the grind. So what I'm going to do here is I have this video, I'm going to split it into 3 parts. Part 1 is going to be Rise Above, which is going to be a countdown of my top 8 releases from the band. Part 2 is going to be Inner Incineration, which is me mainly focusing on my favorite release from the band and basically how I discovered them. And then part 3 is going to be Got Time to Kill, which I'm going to focus on some other projects that the members have been involved with or are involved with. And that's pretty much it. So time to get it started. My number 8 is The Code is Red, Long Live the Code from 2005. And this is a pretty brutal release, focusing more on the grind, but also still some heavy death riffs. And favorite song, Silence is Deafening, The Code is Red, Long Live the Code, Our Pain is Their Power, Striding Purposefully Backwards. Just overall a very aggressive release. Number 7, Enemy of the Music Business from 2000. And this is basically when the band went back to playing more serious and straightforward brutal grind after the experimentation they did in the 90s. And this is a pretty great release in my opinion. Songs like Taste the Poison, Bourbon, Can't Play Won't Pay, Fracture in the Equation. Definitely one to check out if you're into the grind side of Napalm Death. Number 6, Order of the Leech from 2002. And this is basically a continuation of the sound on Enemy of the Music Business. But for me personally, I like this one a little bit better. I think the songs, just for me personally, are catchier. Continuing War on Stupidity, Icing on the Hate, Per Capita, Farce and Fiction. Like I said, it's another great release and really catchy in my opinion. Number 5, Words from the Exit Wound from 1998. And this album to me is like a bridge between the experimentation they did in the 90s and a return to the grind in 2000. And favorite tracks on here are The Infiltrators, Clutching at Barbs, Septic in Perspective, Thrown Down a Rope. Just like I said, there's some experimentation still on this one, but also it's very heavy and has a really brutal production. Number 4, Inside the Torn Apart from 1997. And this is a cleaner sounding Napalm Death, a little bit of experimentation. But for me, this one is just a really great release. The songs are very, very catchy. The opener, Breathe to Breathe, the title track, Inside the Torn Apart, Prelude, Indispose, Low Point, If Systems Persist. Just like I said, very, very good album for me. Very catchy, still has some fast parts in it, mostly mid-paced, but there's some fast stuff still. For me, it's a great release. Number 3, Utopia Banished from 1992. For me, this is a continuation of more of the death metal side of Napalm Death. And, super great tracks on this one. The World Keeps Turning and Arianisms, Got Time to Kill, Judicial Slime, the closing track Contemptuous, which is a little bit experimental, and just overall a very furious album and one of my favorites. My number 2 is Mentally Murdered from 1989, which I don't own that release on its own, but when I first heard it, it was part of this compilation from 1991, Death by Manipulation, and what a fantastic release. Lee Dorian just sounds super guttural on this. You have Bill Steer on guitar, and it's just a ripping death grind release, in my opinion. Opener, Rise Above, Walls of Confinement, No Mental Effort, Cause and Effect, Mentally Murdered. Just what a killer track. And some of these were redone songs from the second album, From Enslavement to Obliteration, but I think they sound much, much better on this release. It's just an EP that just absolutely kills. It's great. Number one, Harmony Corruption from 1990. For me, this is the ultimate Napalm Death record. This is them putting out death metal, produced by Scott Burns down at Morris Sound, and just a fantastic release. Every song on here, including probably their greatest song, in my opinion, Suffer the Children, but also Unfit Earth is absolutely killer. Vision Conquest, and Inner Incineration, Circle of Hypocrisy, Extremity Retained, Malicious Intent. It's just, for me, a fantastic record and absolutely my favorite. For me, Harmony Corruption is the ultimate Napalm Death record. It was actually the first one I heard in 1990. I picked it up on cassette. Had not heard anything from the band up to that point. It was just a blind buy. They were being advertised with other, very good earache bands at the time. And I picked it up and I was definitely not disappointed. I was really into this record, still am to this day. Just an amazing performance from start to finish, particularly the drums. Mick Harris, I understand, is very critical of his performance, and I don't really get it because for me, it's just top to bottom, really flawless and just really catchy and fast drumming and just out of this world. And it was unlike anything I'd heard at the time. Nowadays you have tons of amazing drummers, but for 1990, for me, from everything I'd heard up to that point, his drumming was just so killer. And also new members, Mark Barney Greenway on vocals, Mitch Harris on guitar, Jesse Pintado on guitar, just also very catchy and killer riffs. And another thing to mention is Mick Harris actually wrote a lot of the music, including Suffer the Children and Unfit Earth, two of my favorites. And also Shane Embry on bass, but for most of the album, his bass is not really high in the mix, but there's a few parts where his bass does come through and adds to the album. So I can't go without mentioning that. So like I said, for me, Harmony Corruption is just the ultimate death metal release from Napalm Death, and one of my, probably in my top 5. One more thing I want to mention was Scott Burns had said that Mick Harris was actually very unhappy with the production of Harmony Corruption. For me, I like it a lot, but apparently Mick wanted a intuned left-hand path kind of sound, which would have been interesting, to hear this album if it had been recorded at Sunlight Studios with Thomas Skogsberg. But anyway, like I said, for me, it's a killer release, one of my favorites of all time as far as death metal goes, so definitely check this one out. Current and former members of Napalm Death have been involved in various other bands over the years, so I just kind of want to highlight some of my favorite releases from these bands. And starting things off with Benediction, Subconscious Terror, which features Mark Barney Greenway on vocals, and this was the band he was in before joining Napalm Death, so wearing the Nocturna shirt there. Benediction, also from Birmingham, England, and a very good death metal band. All right, next up is also a death metal band called Insidious Disease, if you want to call this a super group, and it features Shane Embry on bass. So I think this is a pretty good band. They have 2 releases out, so worth checking out. Also featuring Mark, who sang for Morgoth. He's one of my favorite vocalists. All right, next up is probably the most infamous grind release of all time, Terrorizer World Downfall, featuring Jesse Pintado, along with David Vincent and Pete Sandoval from Morbid Angel. Very killer and important grindcore release. All right, next is a death grind release from 1989 featuring Mitch Harris and Mick Harris, Defecation, Purity, Dilution, and very catchy. And I find it to be pretty similar to Mentally Murdered. If you're a fan of Mentally Murdered, check this one out. All right, next up is the band Venomous Concept featuring Danny Herrera from Napalm Death and also Kevin Sharp, previously of Brutal Truth, on vocals. And it's like a hardcore, punkish grind release, I would say. And also Shane Emery plays on this one as well. All right, this is one of my favorite releases of these that I'm showing, and talking about Goat Lord Reflections of the Solstice. And this one has Mitch Harris on backing vocals on a few tracks, and just a killer Black and Death Doom release with an interesting drum sound. So check that one out. Very original sounding, in my opinion. All right, last on the list, and probably my favorite, Righteous Pigs, Stress Related, featuring Mitch Harris on guitar. This is before he joined Napalm Death. And it's a very original sounding, basically like death, grind with hardcore type vocals, and very, very catchy. And like I said, it doesn't sound like anything I've heard before. I think they have their own unique sound. And they also have the release Live and Learn, which was their debut. And just an absolutely killer release. One of my favorites. Definitely check them out. All right, before I end this one, I just want to show a few things from my collection and start things off with some DVDs. And here is Napalm Death, the DVD, which has shows from 89 and 90, along with a bunch of video clips. And for me, this is a great one because, there's highlights from the Harmony Corruption era on this one. All right, next DVD is Punishment in Capitals, which is a live recording from the 2000s, and very good set list, focusing on Enemy of the Music Business being their newest release when this was put out. There's also some great older tracks on this one, and some other additional shows are included as well. All right, here I have a few CDs, all from Japan, starting with the Japanese version of Harmony Corruption, which includes the Mentally Murdered EP and the Suffered the Children EP. The only thing I don't really care for on this was they put the Suffer the Children tracks after Mentally Murdered. I think it would have made more sense to put that first, because then it flows right with Harmony Corruption, same recording session, but minor complaint there. And next up I have 2 on 1. This has Scum and From Enslavement to Obliteration together on one CD. So a very cool release to have. And finally, The World Keeps Turning EP, which has a different version of The World Keeps Turning and a couple other tracks, along with the Live Corruption 1990 show on CD as well, as included here. So very happy to have that also. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.